There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch Michael by there.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, 27-year veteran of the NYPD. We have a pretty interesting case today. We're actually not going to focus on the Brian Kohberger case today in the Idaho quadruple of Ethan Chapin, Madison Mogan, Kaylee Gonsalves, and Zaina Kernodle. We're going to focus on the case of Utah mother Kouri Richins. This case is sort of fascinating because I think it lets people know, like, so many people think they can outfox law enforcement and that they can lie to anyone and get away with it. Maybe because they've been doing it their whole life, they feel like they can lie and tell a lie and get over on that lie. But realizing when they're lying to professionals, it's a little bit different than lying to, say, your husband or your loved one or your boss or your friend. It's a whole lot different. Now, this is the case, of course, Kouri Richins. You see, they had her and her husband Eric had a beautiful family. That's Eric there, and with Kouri, and they had three sons. And last year in March, her husband, Eric, died suddenly. And after that, she did something that was a little bizarre. She wrote a children's book that she said she hoped would help her three boys process the loss and comforted by the knowledge that their father would always be with them. So what we know occurred, of course, this May, she was arrested and charged with Eric's murder. There's, in this photo, there's the cover of the book that she wrote, Are You With Me? And that was purportedly for her sons and her to get over the grief of the loss of her husband. According to the New York Times, an autopsy and toxicology report determined that Eric Richins, he was 39 years old at the time, had 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl in his system, and that the drug was illicit and not medical grade. The medical examiner also concluded that the fentanyl had been ingested orally, according to the court documents. Kouri Richins published Are You With Me on March 7th, just over a year after her husband's death. A few weeks later, she appeared on TV stations actually promoting the book. She said that her kids and her wrote the book to deal with different emotions in a grieving process that we've experienced in the last year, hoping that it would help the kids deal with this and kind of find happiness in some way or another, she told KTVX-TV. It's comforting for them that they're not living this life alone. Dad is still here, but in a different way. Well, she was arrested in May and charged with his murder. A detention hearing set for May 19th. The lawyer for Ms. Richins did not immediately respond to requests for comment. According to court documents, on the evening of March 3rd, 2022, Ms. Kouri Richins and Eric Richins were celebrating the closing of a sale on a house that Kouri Richins, a real estate agent, that had sold. She made her husband a Moscow Mule, a cocktail in the kitchen around 9 p.m. and brought it into their bedroom where Mr. Richins drank it in bed. Ms. Richins later told investigators that she went to bed and woke up around 3 a.m. because one of the boys was having a nightmare. When she returned to the couple's bedroom, Ms. Richins told investigators she felt Eric was cold to the touch. She called 911. When the Summit County Sheriff's deputies and emergency medical workers arrived, they found Mr. Richins on the floor at the foot of the bed. According to the court documents, they attempted life-saving measures but could not revive him, and he was pronounced dead. Kouri Richins told investigators that she had left her phone plugged in next to her bed when she went to check on her son. But investigators later found that the phone had been locked and unlocked multiple times between the time she said she had gone to her son's bedroom and the 9/11 call, according to court documents. And she had sent and received messages during that time. The messages were later deleted. Uh, so, I mean, amazing, right? When someone thinks they can just get away with something like this and they sloppily use what we have watched in so many other cases in Murdoch and, of course, Brian Koberger, the digital devices that track your every movement, that contain text messages and incoming and outgoing phone calls and go back and can be traced for a long time by law enforcement. So she may have thought she was super smart, but she made some real elementary mistakes if you're talking about trying to get away with this heinous crime. With me tonight, and you're going to be very happy to hear who I have with me tonight, we have Professor of Criminal Justice, attorney, and retired NYPD Sergeant Mike Geary. And let's bring Mike Geary on the show right now. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Hey, Billy. Good evening. Thank you for having me on.
It's always a pleasure. We came off last night's show that was a big hit, and I thought that I would have you back on tonight because this is sort of a baffling case. But you know, Mike, I've seen it in my career with the NYPD and Manhattan North Homicide Squad. People that thought they could outsmart the detectives. People that could. There's an old expression: "Don't bullshit a bullshitter," you know. And when you try to lie, professionals who their job is to uncover lies and to get information that thwarts lies, she's just an amateur then.
Yeah, Billy, people don't realize that cops, by their very nature, and homicide detectives especially, are very pessimistic people. You know, they tend to think the worst of people, especially in an investigation like this, when you have a young man, 39 years old, and he passes out. He passes away in bed, and the only people who are in the house are his family, his three sons, and his wife. And unfortunately, she's not dealing with people she's normally used to dealing with, maybe business associates that she's lied to in the past or talking to in the past, or, some influencing them in some way, friends, neighbors, loved ones, family, business associates, all the people that you talk to, and maybe you tell little white lies, maybe you exaggerate, maybe you get over on them in a business deal. But you're dealing now with people who and you may be very good at your job, but you're dealing with people who are now very good at their job, and they don't have those prior relationships, and they tend to view people very, pessimistically. And she doesn't realize the amount of, technology at the detective's fingertips, and she made some very elementary mistakes.
You know, Dr. Pamela Cholette, thank you for this. And I was going to get to this, but this is it's crazy. 6 life insurance policies. Please, I can't. But I think at least 2 or 3 of them she bought prior to him without his knowledge. But the crazy thing about this was that he was suspicious that his wife was going to kill him. In fact, he thought that she had tried on at least one occasion before to poison him.
Right.
So he actually took the life insurance policy and took her off the beneficiary list and made his sister the executor, and she was taken off as the beneficiary. So I don't think I would still live in a house with someone with a wife who I thought was going to kill me. I think I might move on, or I'd have her move on. Uh, I'd be sleeping with one eye open. That's no way to live.
Right.
Mike.
Sleep in the other bedroom with the door locked, with a firearm next to you, with one eye open. I guess he may have believed in some levels that they had gotten past some previous marital strife, and maybe he talked himself into actually even believing that maybe it's just my imagination that I suddenly got violently ill, a year ago after we had a big to do. But he probably also believed on some levels by changing the life insurance to a beneficiary, from a personal beneficiary like his wife or someone like that, and changing it to a trust fund that would be there for his children, and to take care of them, and giving the trust fund, executor, being the executor of the trust fund, give that power to his sister, and that his sister would be able to actually administer that trust fund for the benefit of his children. Maybe in some ways he thought they had gotten past that. There was, those previous marital difficulties, and that they were on the road to being back to being a couple in some ways. But still, he did what he did earlier, to maybe also disincentivize, her from actually trying to kill him.
Mike, I was thinking of that old expression, fool me once, shame on shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. But
Right.
this one I was thinking, poison me once, shame on you, poison me twice, I'm dead.
Right.
So it's like there is no second time where someone poisons you twice. Usually, the first time they made a mistake, now they're gonna make sure the second time they have the knockout punch so that there is no third time. So they made sure that they had a high enough dosage that they put in this Moscow Mule to make sure he was dead this time.
Yeah, they, apparently, according to the coroner, it was 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl, which means she probably could have killed, a couple of elephants, given that dosage. So there was no way that a coroner or a homicide detective is going to see that level of narcotic as being an accidental overdose. Where we hear these things and we see them on the news and they're very tragic. Maybe she thought that, it would be just a death. She'd have it quickly, body quickly, disposed of. There's not going to be any. Maybe she never even realized it would be an autopsy. But the dosage was way, way overdone, to the point where the most rookie police homicide detective one day out of the police academy would be suspicious. It's just incredible the amount of poison that he was subject to.
Princess Mitch in the chat asked the question, did they find out the source of the fentanyl? And the answer is yes. They also stated, even in the New York Times article, that it was not a pharmaceutical brand of fentanyl. It was a street brand of fentanyl. So they did track down the person with whom she bought it from. And so that is part of the case against her. I'm going to play a little of this from Law and Order Channel, and it sort of gives you the background of what occurred here.
Of murdering her husband, Eric, by poisoning him last year. It's a sad case, but what makes it sadder and stranger is the fact that Richins wrote a book about grieving for their 3 sons and went on TV to promote it a month before she was arrested. Police in Park City, Utah say Richards was anything but a grieving widow. They claim she is a calculated killer. This case really starts back in 2015. Between that year and 2017, prosecutors say that Kouri Richins bought 4 life insurance policies for her husband, totaling $2 million. Financial problems are really a hallmark of Kouri and Eric's relationship. In September 2020, a court document says that Eric Richins found out that Kouri had spent $250,000 of a home equity line of credit on their home. But he also found out she had withdrawn at least $100,000 from his bank accounts and spent more than $30,000 using his credit cards. The court document also says Kouri was taking money Eric had set aside for his business to pay quarterly taxes. That total, more than $134,000. When Eric confronted his wife about it, the court documents say that she agreed to pay the money back. Then the next month, Eric consulted both a divorce lawyer and an estate planning attorney. He also changed his will and formed a living trust and placed his sister in charge of it, while also changing the beneficiary of his $500,000 life insurance policy. Fast forward to January 2022, Court documents say Kouri changed the beneficiary for a $2 million policy that Eric had to her. The following month, Kouri is accused of contacting a drug dealer and asking for fentanyl, which is a very powerful narcotic. That drug dealer told police, according to court documents, that he handed those pills directly to Kouri. Then on Valentine's Day of last year, Eric said that he ate a sandwich that Kouri had made for him that had a love note on it. He broke out in hives, according to court documents, and had trouble breathing. He told a friend that he believed that Kouri was trying to poison him. Later that month, police say Kouri contacted the drug dealer again, asking for, quote, Michael Jackson stuff. That would be propofol, the powerful anesthetic that killed Michael Jackson. Of course, she was again looking for fentanyl pills. The following month, prosecutors say Kouri had a conversation with a moneylender who she owed a whopping $1.8 million. She also owed nearly $200,000 in taxes, and she owed Eric more than $500,000. The day after that conversation, on March 4th, 2022, Eric Richins died after drinking a Moscow Mule. The medical examiner said that Eric Richins had more than 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl in his system, and that fentanyl had been ingested by mouth. According to court documents, Richins told police she fell asleep in one of her son's rooms that night, but prosecutors say her phone records show otherwise and that she was on the move. 2 days later, prosecutors say Kouri drilled into her husband's safe to get cash. Then in March of this year, Kouri Richins published a children's.
You know, Mike, I just want to stop this at this point for a second. We'll go back to it, but what was she doing with all that money? I mean, how did she blow through all that money? I mean, she was stealing money. She owed her husband $500,000. She owed 1 point something million in taxes. How did she build up tax losses like that where you didn't pay the IRS? I'm baffled by that. The other thing is, I just want to our listeners, this is investigation. And you see the excellent job they did. They went back to 2015. And of course, when you have a case like this, you want to take a deep dive into the background of this couple. And part of that deep dive is financial records. And that is usually under the auspices of the district attorney. The district attorney has a law degree, has the power to subpoena records. A lot of these records, institutions don't want to hand over so easily. And just the power of subpoena, court order, is going to get them to do so. But you see how powerful it is when you start building this timeline and building, and I always use the metaphor, building the investigative house one brick at a time. It becomes very, very powerful. And then, of course, we get back to, circumstantial. Again, circumstantial evidence can be so, so powerful. And that's my lesson for today. I just wanted to expound upon that. And Mike, your feelings on that?
Yeah, the lifestyle that they led, was one where they used a lot of cash, used a lot of money. There was a tremendous amount of renovations going on in their primary place of residence, perhaps $200,000 worth. He had a job as a contractor working with stone, and he was doing very well. She also got into business doing real estate, house flipping. You grab a house, you invest in it, and you see these TV shows where they're on a budget and they go through it and they try to sell it for profit. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It's a real gamble. So she may have made a number of poor business choices and lost money over the course of a number of years, and may have found herself in debt financially from her business practices. And that you would get all of those business records, as you said, with a subpoena from the IRS. And, as a pessimistic homicide investigator, and I'm a pessimistic police sergeant, we look at those, what drives humans to do what they do. And, murder, is a goal that someone engages in, is an action someone engages in to bring about a certain effect. Eliminating a problem, in a divorce or a breakup situation, or for cash. And, any homicide investigator 101, they're going to look to see who's the beneficiaries of any sort of life insurance policy, who's controlling the money. And in this case, it kind of screams out at you that this is the case, that money may be the motive. I'm sure once the investigators talked to the sister who was the executor of the will and had control of the money, I'm sure she was told a lot by the deceased, by Eric, and probably put the homicide investigators on the right trail.
Absolutely. People are talking in the chat. First of all, I'm going to answer a couple of questions in the chat. One is she is under arrest and remanded. There was no bail. She actually goes back to court on the 22nd. I believe on the 22nd, she will still be remanded, because any judge that would release someone like that is alleged to have done this would be concerned that she would maybe get out and kill her children. And I would think that would be the mindset of the judge, because she's actually potentially facing the death penalty in this case. In Utah, what she did is a murder first degree. And I believe partially, and I don't know specifically Utah law, but anytime you kill someone for profit, that kicks it up usually to a murder first degree. And that's
Right.
what she was doing. She was killing someone for profit. It turned out, of course, it was her husband. Someone just asked, what did she do? Mike just went over that. Her job was, she was in real estate. She bought and sold houses. She actually sold real estate. I'll show you her ID card there. There she is. She looks very sweet, and many people wouldn't mind buying a house off of her, but she's devious and evil, but some of the most devious and evil people, I love that expression. She's a wolf in sheep's clothing, and that is very apropos to this woman. But I know it's easy for me to say, I wasn't in the situation, but if someone tries to poison you once, I think it's time to leave. I don't stay around for poisoning number two, And of course, the husband must have known about all these other crimes she was committing behind his back, and specifically her financial situation. How did he not know that, since she was also, look, no one fools around when you are a business owner and you pay quarterly taxes. You want to make sure you pay those quarterly taxes, because if you have a bad quarter or a bad end of the year and all of a sudden you have no money to pay your taxes, the IRS doesn't care. The IRS is going to assess you that money and a fine. So responsible business owners want to make sure that they pay their taxes on a quarterly basis, and they do it promptly.
Yeah, Billy, I think looking at, again, the lifestyle that they were engaging in, she had made mention that he had an affair, and that had caused tremendous difficulties. He may have channeled a lot of money into that relationship. And perhaps, the idea that he would stay after what he believed was an attempt to poison him with the sandwich, he might have not have believed that it was an attempt to kill, but maybe an attempt to make him sick, to appreciate her in some ways. But there was a lot of maybe dishonest dealing within that couple's unit themselves that unfortunately led to this.
Absolutely. Let me play a little bit more of this from Law and Order.
Book that talked about grieving. She said she wrote it for her 3 sons to help them as they mourned the loss of their father. She also went on television to publicize it.
Joining us now is author of Are You With Me, Kouri Richins, to share her 3 C's to helping kids cope with grief. And Kouri, I want to start with your story. What happened in your personal life?
So my husband passed away unexpectedly last year. So it's March 4th was a 1-year anniversary for us. And he was 39. It completely took us all by shock. And we have 3 little boys, 10, 9, and 6. And, my kids and I kind of wrote this book on the different emotions and grieving processes that we've experienced last year, and hoping that it can kind of help other kids you know, deal with this and kind of, you know, find happiness some way or another.
Earlier this month, Kouri Richins was charged with aggravated murder for Eric's death. She's in jail right now and will be back in court next month. Joining me to discuss the case of Eric Richins is Dr. Michelle Dupree. She is a retired forensic pathologist and
I think this woman is a psychopath. I really do. I mean, here she is going on TV and totally like this masquerade. My husband died unexpectedly, and I wrote this book so my 3 sons and I could deal with this. I mean, please, what kind of psychopath do you have to be to do that?
Yeah, Billy, she may be somewhat narcissistic and maybe believe that people will always see her as, you know, the grieving widow with 3 children, although it appears that she, you know, imposed that upon herself, that condition upon herself. And perhaps writing the book, getting the notoriety, rather than laying low, you know, as people might expect, you know, disappear, change your name, move to a different state if there's any sort of suspicion. Um, you know, she knows she has to deal with his family. She knows how his family feels about what his family feels about her. And the idea that she would seek greater publicity is this a real sign that she's not really able to read the room, and that she may not have a real feeling of vulnerability herself. That maybe she felt that after a year she you know, nothing, she had been arrested. They had, you know, the original initial investigation, you know, like in any kind of homicide, when you have a 39-year-old man who's or a human in excellent physical condition, there's always going to be some suspicions. But she might have thought she was in the clear, and that ability to just say, hey, I'm in the clear, move on, you know, may have been part of her undoing.
You know, Mike, you always, when we follow a case like this, all the cases that we have followed, and I specifically will point to Idaho, where people were going absolutely crazy that there was no arrest after 6 weeks, calling it a cold case, disparaging the police, uh, you know, questioning whether the FBI should take over the case. Here was a case that took almost exactly a year, a little more than a year, to make the arrest. And I wonder, what was the family thinking? Were they thinking the same thing, or were they satisfied when the district attorney or the investigators told them, no, we're on it, we're building this case? Because look, it took a year to build a solid case, and that included the financials, that included uh, the digital evidence, and through the digital evidence, they got human evidence. And someone asked in the chat before, will that drug dealer be arrested? And my feelings are no. They'll use that person as a witness, and they'll hold the arrest over that person's head, or persons. It may have been one person that directed her to the drug dealer. They'll held that over their head and force them to testify. And if they don't, they'll be charged with a crime. What are your feelings on that, Mike?
Yeah, Billy, I'm hoping that the police were keeping his family, Eric's family, you know, um, you know, quietly, very quietly, you know, apprised of what was going on as they moved along, assuring them that the slow pace was just to make sure that they, you know, we always say, dot every I, cross every T. You know, Phil knows, I know. You're looking for documents, especially like from the federal government. And you want to get them by subpoena from the IRS, you know, those tax returns, so that you could see what you know, what the financial condition of the family were that before this happened. This is going to take, you know, probably 2 months to get those documents at the very least. You also know, as an homicide investigator, that the medical examiner's office is very slow to work, depending on how you know, overworked and maybe understaffed they are, and to get blood alcohol readings back, to get, an actual analysis of bodily fluids like blood. Sometimes it takes 2 months right there. So I'm hoping that they actually did notify the parents that, please, we are making headway. Don't worry. This, we will come to a satisfactory conclusion. And because if I'm the investigator, that's what I would like to do. If I believe that I could actually trust them enough, to be quiet and not antagonize, the suspect, and just to go along with it, try to live their lives as best they can, knowing that the police are slowly building a case, an airtight case. You do not want to go and mess anything up by rushing it or not providing it with resources. And part of it is patience, because you're dealing with state and federal agencies like banks and the IRS that need to see a subpoena, that need to go through their records. Then you have to get the records. Then you have to analyze the records. And that takes time.
And yeah, exactly. None of these banking institutions or institutions that are required to turn over records,
Mhm.
none of them do it quickly.
No.
Jesse Essex, thank you for the 199 super sticker. Isn't leaving the weapon behind a reversible error? Well, Jesse, in this case, the weapon was poison. And, I don't know if immediately at the scene that they suspected this to be a homicide. That's unclear to me. It's easy to take a step back. And of course, what was the slam dunk evidence was the toxicology from the autopsy, saying he's got 5 or 6 times the amount of fentanyl necessary to kill an elephant in his system. That right there is, of course, what made this a homicide. Now, since it took over a year to arrest her, did she suspect that she was a suspect? That's a good question. I would like to know. Did she know? Her actions indicated that she didn't know. She's writing a book. She's going about her life. She's trying to get the insurance money to which was, I think, totaled over $2 million. So when did they actually pull the trigger and say, there's a homicide investigation, or B, you're under arrest? Is that when she first found out, Mike?
Yeah, Billy, it's hard to tell, like you say, the original timeline, say when the 911, the police got there, paramedics got there. She may have cleaned out that glass or cup or whatever she's alleged to have served the Moscow Mule in. But at that point, even if she cleaned up, it's still in his body, and they can tell approximately at what time did he die, and they could tell by the blood, the amount of poison, and they might be able to tell even, how quickly he died, because if he had died, say, 8 or 9 hours after the ingestion of the poison, it would be in his bladder. Probably there'd be concentration of it in his urine, in his bladder, but it might have been earlier on. He might have passed away. If he passed away very quickly, there might be still some of that in his stomach area, maybe mixed in with some food. So they probably had to wait for the medical examiner's office to tell him, look, guys, you've got a 39-year-old man. He doesn't really have, it appears to be, any sort of natural causes, like, say, cancer or diabetes or something that could possibly kill him. This does look like a homicide. And so, but that takes time, and then they go on. But she may have actually thought she got away with it, because the first, if you and Phil arrive on that scene, or you talk to her the very next afternoon, you're going to be treating her with a lot of respect. You're not going to, you've got to do your preliminary report. You may come out of that initial interview with her being a little suspicious when she says, we had some drinks afterwards, and, I think I made him a Moscow Mule, that sort of thing.
Well, Mike, one of the things that I'm sorry to interrupt you,
no,
that made them suspicious was that she said she performed CPR on him. And that was clear that she hadn't, because he had froth or foam at the mouth. And if someone had performed CPR, that would be the first thing. They would wipe away the foam or the froth at the mouth before performing CPR. So The EMS people, I guess, when interviewed, said no one performed CPR on him other than us when we got there. So she's lying about that if she said she did. And not only did she tell that to the police, she told that to a friend. So she was building up her alibi. She was building up her, protestations and, what is that great expression? I think it's from Shakespeare. You doth protesteth too much. I
Yes.
can't even say it. And she is definitely someone who doth protesteth too much because she's extolling her innocence from minute one and building an alibi from minute one. Mike, I want to play a little bit more of this from Law and Crime. It's a little different. Let's hear this.
Okay, what a story this is. Richins is the 33-year-old Utah mother of three accused of poisoning to death her husband, 39-year-old Eric Richins, by giving him a Moscow Mule laced with excessive doses of fentanyl back in March of 2022. And then after he dies, she writes a children's book about grief called Are You With Me? She even did an interview about this book about a month before her arrest.
Joining us now is author of Are You With Me? Kouri Richins to share her 3 C's to helping kids cope with grief.
Tried to poison him on previous occasions. They had a rocky marriage. Reporting indicates that Kouri had stolen money from her husband, borrowing money on his credit cards, forged his initials to borrow $250,000, took money that he had earmarked for taxes, and she tried to secretly change his life insurance policy for her to become the sole beneficiary. Eric caught wind of this, changed it back to his sister without telling Kouri. In fact, right before he died, he was apparently going to tell her that he was cutting her out of his will. And also the two disagreed about buying a $2 million mansion that Kouri wanted to buy and flip. And after police say she poisoned him, hours later, she actually closed on that property and threw a party. Now, she was supposed to have a detention hearing where it would be decided if she could be released on bail, but that has been postponed to June 6th because new information has come to light. That new information is that prosecutors have learned that Kouri also allegedly purchased 4 life insurance policies on Eric's life, totaling $2 million between 2015 and 2017, and Eric was seemingly not aware of this. It is quite the case. She is currently facing a charge of first-degree aggravated murder, multiple counts of second-degree possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute. Let me bring in right now.
Well, crazy, right? So the grandioseness of her crime, besides, the killing of a husband, obviously, which is the most serious part of this, but the stealing of all this money and the fraudulent activities she was attempting to cover herself, and after he dies, purchasing this $2 million mansion with the intention of flipping it. First of all, to me, that says psycho, because you just lost your husband, and if you want people to believe it was a natural death, your behavior of purchasing a $2 million house after he dies and then throwing a party, that is not what they say in the Lower East Side, kosher. That is definitely not kosher to do that. And that would definitely raise red flags among the investigators. Did you see what she did? That now we got to dig even further and deeper because her behavior is bizarre.
Yeah, Billy, investigators are naturally pessimistic, and life insurance investigators are homicide detectives who quite often when they retire, they become life insurance investigators. Everybody is very pessimistic about this sort of thing, especially when you see numerous life insurance policies, and not an old one that might be 30 years old from when the couple was very young. No, recently purchased life insurance policies. That's a huge red flag. And then, as you talked about just a little while ago, the first red flag would be the fact that she lied about the CPR. And as an investigator, you'd be like, why would you lie about that sort of thing? It's an unnecessary detail. Nobody would think badly of you if you didn't try CPR, but to lie about it and then repeat the lie, it shows.
Mike, you have to go to your famous expression.
Oh, I'm going to bring it up right now. Consciousness of guilt. Thank you. Oh, perfect timing. Perfect timing. Yes,
It was
absolutely.
perfect timing. It's definitely consciousness of guilt,
Right.
and almost like a Freudian type thing, a
Yeah.
Freudian consciousness of guilt, because you're trying to cover your ass, but at the same time, you're screaming out, "I'm guilty."
Right. Right. An innocent person, generally has no reason to lie, and to lie about certain things that, wouldn't really ever, you know, an innocent person wouldn't be thinking about lying about at all. And then to repeat them. Yeah. So investigators, you might be a really brilliant scientist, lawyer, doctor, real estate developer, attorney, or whatever you are, but and you're great at what you do. But when you go into homicide, you're not playing on your field. You're playing on the investigator's home field, and you're playing by their rules. And they control the clock, and they have all of they have your playbook, because they've seen many things like this in the past. You may be
Mike, I
clear,
just like to make
maybe
a
not.
comment about Mike. I'd like to make a
Yeah.
comment about that. I've seen so many different types of perpetrators, street thugs, right up to doctors,
Mhm.
PhDs, MDs, scientists. And the real educated ones condescendingly spoke to the detectives as the detectives just took the guy apart. And the super educated person, didn't even realize he or she was being taken apart, because they were so cocky and so
Mhm.
condescending to the detective. Next thing they knew, were like, "Oh no, I just admitted to this," because no one can keep talking. And that's why, they say one of the things in the Miranda warnings is you have the right to remain silent, because anyone that keeps talking to an investigator and thinks that they can trick them or outsmart them is lying to themselves. And it's so not true. Mike, I just want to do a quick commercial here. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime from a police perspective, then you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed to us, go on our YouTube. It's free to go on our YouTube. Go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, ring that bell, make lots of comments. We love to read your comments. We also have a Patreon if you want to support us financially with 3 different levels. And we have a YouTube channel memberships with 5 different levels, and you can help us out in that way. Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. Just hit us off on YouTube and press that like button. So, Mike, yeah, it's having said that, post arrest, she's sending information to the detectives. And I'm going to play a little bit of, and like, again, you don't keep talking. You don't think you can outsmart people. Oh, check this, check that, telling the investigators what to do. But she was so cocky that she was doing that.
We're showing you not the whole thing, but a big chunk of it. And what we did is we had one of our producers read it so you can follow along. You'll see the words and you'll hear what Kouri Richins is saying to investigators after the death of her husband. And as we said in the beginning, what you say can and will be used against you.
Hey there. I thought I would clarify some other items on your list that you spoke to.
Redacted.
About. The beginning of February last year, my kids had a soccer tournament in Mesquite. The day before we left, February 2nd, 2022, I tested positive for COVID. I have attached the picture of my test from on my counter in the kitchen from when I first found out. Photo 1. I had sent it to my mom and
Redacted.
to let them know because I was just around both of them. Eric was the coach of the soccer team, and I'm the annoying mom on the sideline that never stops yelling. We didn't miss games or tournaments. We're a huge soccer family. When we found out I had COVID, I didn't want to miss the soccer tournament, nor did I want my kids to get sick. So I stayed at Casablanca. I didn't want to risk getting my boys ill during the tournament and then not play well. I brought a box of home tests with me to test every day so I could either join the boys staying at my father-in-law's or at least be with them during the game. Casablanca is about 5 minutes from the soccer field. Actually, there is a picture of the room number I stayed in. I had taken a picture for my mom and Eric. I would take pictures of my test to Eric to say, still positive. You can check Eric's phone for this. I stood on the sidelines wearing a mask and not interacting with anyone. Happy to get other soccer parents to attest to this. Eric had gotten COVID after we got home from Mesquite. You asked,
redacted,
about any exotic vacations I have taken since Eric's passing. I went on 2 trips last year. One, my kids tried out at soccer camp in SLC to qualify to play in Spain in June, and both my kids made it. So yes, I took them to Spain in October 2022. I have attached their invitation letters. Also, Eric and I went to Mexico every year, sometimes twice. We traveled a lot. We have taken the boys to Mexico a few times. We like to go in January. However, January of 2022, we could not go because Eric had his hunting trip to Mexico trip of 2 weeks planned, and it was too much that month. This is not new for us to go to Mexico or for us to go out of the country or on a vacation with our kids. I took my kids and my mom came with us in August of 2022. As I hope you understand, the months prior to this, since Eric's death, have been hard to deal with. No, I have never been to Key West or the Keys in Florida. However, my nanny went with her family in June 2022, so maybe you have something mixed up. Eric's affair was the same year I moved out. The trust was created as well as him looking into a divorce. I never actually moved out. I moved my clothes out one weekend to make Eric understand I'm not kidding about leaving him if he doesn't end things with
redacted,
I did this on a Thursday or Friday while he was out of town. I was home Monday. I never stayed another night at that other house. Eric and I figured things out like most couples do.
redacted,
Was her name. He changed her name in his phone so I wouldn't know about it. And honestly, we worked things out, and after that, I never went through his phone again to see if he changed it back, but you have his phone and can check. Eric and I went to
redacted,
counseling in Camas, 801.
redacted.
We only
So, I think pretty amazing. Like, did she not have an attorney? I don't think she did, because an attorney would have told her, do not correspond with the investigators. What are you doing their job for them? I mean, she's giving them volumes and volumes of what she hopes to be exculpatory evidence for herself, right? She's
Right.
trying to provide exculpatory, and guys, see that? I learned that from Mike last night. Not really, but I knew that word. But I think you guys all learned that word, exculpatory and inculpatory, right? Exculpatory is evidence that tends to clear the defendant, right? And she's trying to provide exculpatory evidence on her own behalf. What investigator would take that and say, oh, she's innocent. Look at all the evidence she's given us to show that she's innocent. Again, Mike, to use your expression, this is consciousness of guilt.
Yes, Billy, when I was in law school and I was in a criminal law class, one of the professors had a great line, and he said, to any of you aspiring criminal defense attorneys, the one thing you must do when you represent a criminal defendant, and that's to tell them to shut up. And because she is the typical, I can get over with my charm, my wit, my just saying things, and they'll believe me. They talk themselves into believing that they know better, they can get over, that they're very believable. They don't really see the world through any other eyes but their own, and they don't know how they come across. She is a criminal defense attorney's worst nightmare. And I don't know when
Mike,
exactly
just when
this
you
took
look,
place, but it was terrible what she did.
Mike, when you look at this picture, what it says to me, and then when I hear her voice, I think she thinks she can get over with her charm and her sexuality and her beauty is what she's trying to do. And I mean, I think someone pointed out to us in the chat, and I'm not quoting it exactly, but she entitled the email, "Hey guys," like who's talking to the detectives, the investigators? Hey guys, this is the suspect in the murder.
Right.
That's crazy, but she's missing a few marbles.
Mhm.
But that is how she interacts with the world. And that's how and that's what's gotten her over in her whole life up to she's 33 years old. She's gotten over with that persona. So why give it up? Why go away from it? It works. I'm going to stay with it, you know.
Right. Yeah, we do. It's worked for her in the past, so keep it going. We do some play acting in our classes, and I tell my students, you can talk to someone, like in an old as a detective in like an old 1940s film noir, threaten the person. We're going to lock you up, Rocky, and you're going to the big house forever. Or you could charm someone, and we go through different scenarios. How do you talk to a male or female suspect? If you're a male or female investigator, depending on what they've done. And, you can take on the scenario of being a very quiet, very quiet, unaggressive, unassuming kind of homicide detective. That looks outwardly not very aggressive and not very suspicious of someone. Yet the whole time in their mind, they're thinking, I'm focusing in on that person. And the suspect may be thinking, I got over on this person. Hey guys, let me just tell you some information for your edification here. Blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, the cops are like, we've never seen such an amazing criminal defendant giving us all this information, times, dates, places, talking about their marital difficulties. All of these things are motive. It's just amazing.
Yes,
It's just amazing.
exactly. And you know something, this verbatim, or this is going to be put in what's called a DD5, at least in NYPD.
Mhm.
They may call it something different in Utah. It's going to be put in the detective's report, every single word, and this is going to be copies are going to be made of this attached to the case folder, and this is going to be used against her in court. It's like invaluable evidence. And then, of course, we spoke about earlier, the digital evidence is just, people don't like when you use the word smoking gun, but it's such powerful evidence because it's so hard to argue against digital evidence. Like she's claiming she turned her phone off, and then they found out that she had turned it off and on 3 or 4 times, sent text messages, and then tried to delete the text messages. So all of those things, all of your actions are saved within that electronic device. A phone could be your worst friend and excuse me, your best friend or your worst enemy, but it's going to track every single thing you did. And for an investigator, it is what I used to call a treasure trove of information. And whether it be from the GPS, from you hitting cell sites with your cell phone, or just incoming, outgoing calls, text messages, all of those things, you may not think about that they're so, it's such powerful evidence because it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you're not thinking clearly. You're tired, you're scared, you just committed a murder. And you're doing these things maybe without thinking about, oh, there's going to be a record of this. They're gonna subpoena this. They're gonna do a search warrant on my phone. I don't know if she thought about that.
Billy, you're right. She might have thought, if she thought at all, she might have thought that they may go through his business records and his cell phone, and that would be it. And really not connect any sort of dots back to her. Again, very, very tremendously and potentially, shooting herself in the foot. That's her Achilles heel. The fact that she's got this amazingly confident idea that she can get over on the detectives like this. Always think about, hey guys, kind of thing. It just cracks you up when you think about it. She may have not realized how methodical police are. She may have thought they was just, okay, they're going to take him to the hospital. He's dead. Maybe they'll ask me about his financials. Maybe not. Maybe they'll ask about the 1 or 2 life insurance policy. Maybe not. She may have thought they'll just do a real preliminary single interview and that would be it. Not realizing that what she gave him was such a huge amount that it was far beyond anything that would be necessary to kill a human, and far beyond anything that was accidental, like an accidental poisoning or something like that, or an accidental ingestion of something. Yeah, the hubris is just remarkable.
And you're right, the methodical nature of this investigation, that it took upwards of 12 months, I think 13 months,
Mhm.
to complete this investigation and to move in and make the arrest and charge her with murder first degree. And for those that ask, why is it a murder first degree? Well, we stated earlier on in the show that if you commit a murder for profit or for gain, it kicks it up to from a second to a first degree. And that is the case here. So in essence, Kouri Richins is eligible for the death penalty. I know her crocodile tears and her, maybe perhaps her beauty and maybe her batting her eyelashes at the judge, she may think she can get over like she has her whole life. But I don't think it's going to. She looks a little bit different. You see the picture right now in court than she looks. She looked, as a free person, and people always do. They look much different in court, or much different when they've had to cool their heels inside a jail or a prison for a bunch of months, and they come out. It changes your whole aspect, your whole outlook on life, and it really there's a real difference. I mean, there's a real difference in the persona of someone who may go in real cocky, put them in jail for 30 days, and they come back out and they're still, say being held for trial or potentially going for bail. Their whole attitude's changed. It's cooled them off a little bit.
Yeah, Billy, they get a dose of reality. They don't, she plotted this. We don't know how long, weeks, several months, maybe 6 months, maybe a year, could be even longer. We don't really know when it began. But, many people don't have that fatalistic, oh, I'm going to get caught someday attitude. She may have had that attitude that, she's a mom of 3 boys. Her husband dies. That's a tragedy. She's going to have the sympathy, and maybe garnering some more sympathy by writing a book makes her look that much more innocent, not realizing that the homicide detectives, they're very patient people. They're very patient people. And remember, there's no statute of limitations on homicide. If it, we hear about DNA solving homicides, the famous one in Philadelphia, the boy in the box, that was like a 65, 70-year-old homicide, was recently solved about a year ago through genealogical DNA. So, the idea that she would probably escape was something that she believed in, that kept her going. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's what you said also. I was going to say the same exact thing. There is no statute of limitations for murder. And the detectives, they can be as patient as they want to be. They didn't have the press in this case saying, oh, this is a cold case.
Right.
Oh, what's going on? Why is it taking so long? Bring in the FBI, bring in the CIA, bring in, the state police, bring in, they didn't have that. They could take their time because they had a target from day one. She was their target from day one. Now they had to just metaphorically cross their T's and dot their I's, put a strong case together. This whole information that she gave to detectives isn't over. There's more. Let me play a little bit more on this.
Only went about 4 times. Maybe it wasn't for us.
Redacted.
And
Redacted.
are the same person, as I'm assuming you know that. Ha ha ha. I'm also assuming
Redacted.
told Woody her husband got a call from him and gave him all this information. LOL. Yet he didn't ever go and talk to detectives. Ironic how these things work. Mental health. Yes, I got postpartum after my second child in 2014. Yes, I took medication for it. No, Eric and I did not have financial problems ever. Yes, Eric made more money than me. Do you make more money than your wives? Have I ever been financially reliant on Eric in the last 5 years? Absolutely not. Eric did not want me working because 1, his first wife cheated on him with a guy at work. 2,
Redacted.
3, Eric wanted us to live in the typical conservative life where the man takes care of his family and the wife is a homemaker, wife, mom, and that's it. That is not my personality and not the way I was raised. I'm very independent. Even when I stayed home with my kids the first few years, I was in grad school for years because I wanted to be more and do more than be a homemaker. And when I did and started my business, it took some adjusting, but Eric and I were fine with it. We hired my nanny and everything worked out. My nanny,
Redacted.
801,
Redacted.
moved out.
Folks, some of the stuff they're
Mhm.
they're redacting names, they're redacting addresses, they're redacting things that they don't want for everyone to see. But that's what's being redacted. The names of people whose identifications must be protected.
Out because she was engaged and she and her fiance were moving in together. That was always supposed to be temporary. She's worked full-time for Eric and I for years prior to his death. If anyone can tell you about our marriage, it's her. She lived with us. Feel free to call her.
Redacted.
Has already submitted her phone records to you to prove that your toll is incorrect.
Redacted.
We'll also be submitting hers over to you guys today or tomorrow. I am working on getting mine. However, Eric's business partner is not being cooperative, but you can call
Redacted.
and ask for them, and he would probably give them to you. 801.
Redacted.
I know what time I went to bed that night. There was no hole in my story. Hopefully, by obtaining 4 phone record documentation, you guys can see this too. Happy to clarify or provide anything else you may need. I just want this over. I just want our lives back and move on and grieve and mourn my husband without looking over my shoulder constantly for you guys or the idiotic private investigator or the Richins family. Whatever I can do to help close this out, just ask. I'll give you whatever you want to know. Please check with the lab on those gummies. P.S. Chad, I heard you also know our good friends.
Redacted.
Their son and my son play on the same soccer team. When Eric passed,
Redacted.
took over coaching. You guys should even chat with them if you feel necessary. Kouri Richins.
Thanks for the clarification, Corey. I don't know that it matters either, but I appreciate the communication. Best, Chad.
Definitely appreciate the
It's baffling to me that they're almost talking like they're friends. She's given this information and she fully knows she's a suspect, but at this point, I think she still thinks she can talk her way out of it. I'm just mourning my husband. I want to get my life back. That was totally different in the reality of it. There was totally different than the reality right here. Here, I think she knows her goose is cooked, especially when her sister-in-law stood up in court and spoke about her and what an evil person she is. Mike?
Yeah, Bill, when she's given all this information to the police, she's thinking that they're actually going to buy not only the information, but that they're going to buy her version of the story, and that other people that she tells them, oh, contact this person, they'll back me up. She believes that that person that she gives the information to the police, that person will actually back up her story. She doesn't realize that people may have very different perceptions of who she is and their relationship and her husband's prior relationship. And she's very, you can tell she's a little miffed and she's very overconfident. But I think, the part that you could see some real hurt is when she was talking about Eric having an affair behind her back and changing the phone number of his girlfriend once she had detected who the girlfriend was. So, no matter how you can gloss over these things and go, hi guys, how are you kind of deal, the police are reading it from a very different perspective. And they're not nearly as, blithely, I guess, by word, ignorant of how people act in this situation. Cops are real good observers of the human condition, and they understand. They've seen people. They're homicide investigators. This isn't the first one they've done. They've seen these kind of situations with couples and the things that couples do to each other, and sometimes it involves murder. murdering someone that you thought you'd love forever. And they weren't fooled one bit. And in fact, when the investigator wrote back, thanks for the information, maybe he was hoping for a little more. You never know. Just keep that line of communication open, because what she's doing is slowly helping them build a case against her.
Absolutely. I'm going to finish off with this, Mike. Just want to play a little bit more of this, and this will
Victims.
take us out.
Greg Scortis is with us. Greg, great to see you tonight.
Nice to see you again.
That's just a piece of that email. That's not the whole thing. To me, there's a sense of rambling in it, like someone who's trying to over-explain things, right? I mean, that's what I took away from it, the big picture.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, no question about it. That's exactly what she was doing, Vinny. She was covering her tracks. She was thinking that she was being manipulative, that she was getting away with a lot of things with the law enforcement, and trying to sort of put some of the blame on Eric, even though almost nothing she said there was true. There was no affair. There was no relationship. The problems with their marriage were her. And just for her to say she hadn't had financial problems is just absurd. She was upside down with her credit cards. She was stretched out far with hard money lenders. She was in serious trouble. And Eric, as we've learned, was worth far, far more to her dead than divorced, according to their prenuptial agreement.
So I want to go through a little bit of what we just experienced there from her email and do just a little bit of fact checking on it all. First, Eric's affair was the same year I moved out. The trust was created as well as him looking into a divorce. From your perspective, the family's perspective, is that true?
Absolutely not. There's no truth to that whatsoever. There was no affair. There was nothing that he did that would have caused this relationship to end the way it did. We have some information that she may have been involved with someone else, but I don't want to get into that at all. But that statement, Vinny, is simply untrue.
Oh, we've got another one here. The financial problems. No, Eric and I did not have financial problems ever. Yes, Eric made more money than me. Do you make more money than your wives? Have I ever been financially reliant on Eric in the past 5 years? Absolutely not. What are your thoughts about that one, Greg?
You know, when these two met, Vinny, she was a clerk at a Home Depot, which is an admirable job. There's no question about it. He was a successful businessman with his stone and masonry business, and he made exponentially more money than her. He was a ticket for her to have money that she had never had before. He helped her get into real estate. He helped her get licensed. She was looking at trying to flip homes. She was trying to make money with his money. She was terrible at it by all accounts. She got in trouble with a lot of her debt, a lot of her finances. But to say that she didn't rely on him financially is simply untrue. She had a great job, but she wasn't making anything like she did after she married Eric, and after she was able to profit from the 7 figures that he had in life insurance.
Let's get to another one here. This is about the hole in the story. I know what time I went to bed that night. There is no hole in my story. Hopefully by obtaining 4 phone record documentation, you guys can see this too. There is a little bit of a hole in her story. Isn't there an unaccounted for time period here?
Yeah, and the forensics that the police went through with her phone records were really interesting. We heard about that at the hearing that was held on Monday. This was a detention hearing where the government had to put on some evidence about the sufficiency of their case. And they had tracked her phone. They had shown where she had been while he was literally gasping for his last breaths, and she was wandering around the house. She told police that she went and tried to perform CPR on him. Of course, the medical examiner said nobody performed CPR on him. She said that she went in his bedroom to check on him. Her phone records showed that she was walking around in different parts of the house, not checking on him, not in the bedroom, not doing anything that would have been sort of to make sure he was okay. I think, if anything, she was trying to make sure that her fentanyl cocktail was doing its job.
One more here. At the end, she wrote, please check with the lab on those gummies. And I guess she's trying to infer that Eric was some sort of a drug addict or was using illicit drugs.
which is also completely untrue, Vinny. I mean, he used THC gummies, as some people do, to help him sleep. He never had a problem with opioids. I mean, this guy was active in his kids' soccer coaching. He was active in the community. He was an avid hunter. He was an avid outdoorsman. He took very, very good care of himself. And what happened, of course, he died of a fentanyl overdose. And at the time, and even today, as you know, a lot of people have opioids are a huge problem in our country. And I suppose that it would be easy for police to walk into somebody's house dying from a fentanyl overdose and sort of just assume, well, here's another person who's abused drugs, and sort of bypass it. And I think that's what was being banked on here. But Eric had no prior history involving opioids whatsoever, no prior history involving illegal drugs whatsoever. And again, it was just another smokescreen to try to get people away from what was really going on here.
Extremely interesting. I think that sort of spelled it out. That's going to take us to the top of the hill. This is an interesting case. I mean, but something, it seems when you look at a case like this, of course, this is more than a year old now. March, it occurred in March, April, May. So it's coming on 15 months ago, this occurred. It seems so simple, doesn't it? It seems so simple now when you look at it. Of course, she's the number one suspect. Of course, it's so easy. None of this stuff is easy. Nothing. Because everything, all evidence that the police get has to be presented, has to be invoiced, has to be presented correctly, has to be believable. There's going to be experts on, of course, the digital evidence and all of that stuff. And again, I'll say it, Kouri Richins is innocent till proven guilty. It would seem that she hasn't done herself many favors with talking and sending these emails to the police, but that was her choice. Mike, why don't we go to final words since we're at
final words? Yeah. Whenever for the viewing public here and your fans, when you hear about homicide investigations that seem to go on forever, where you would immediately think, oh, I know who the suspect is. You're the armchair detective. Sometimes even a simple act, and we humans react to some very basic things: lust, greed, desire, thirst, hunger. But if we're going to use some sort of need, like say lust or greed, we may develop a real spider web's worth of very complicated things going on, and to try to get away with that sort of crime. And when you hear about criminal investigations and people complaining that the police aren't doing their job or they're taking too long, no, just have patience, because the police, sometimes it takes a long time, 6 weeks sometimes, just or 2 months just to get some phone records. And that's some of the most basic things that police always look for. So always have patience when you see these sorts of cases in the news.
Mike, I think you should be saying the 10 o'clock mass at St. Raymond's Catholic Church. The theme being patience. Folks, I wanted to get this in before I say goodbye. If you're looking for a fantastic defense attorney in the New York metropolitan area, then Joe Murray is your man. Joe Murray is a retired NYPD police officer who has one of the most interesting stories you could ever hear if you have one day to hear his story. But he's a fantastic defense attorney, and you can reach Joe on his cell at 718-514-3855. Email him at joe@jmurray-law.com, or his website is jmurray-law.com. Joe Murray is a huge supporter of the Police Off the Cuff podcast, has been with us from the very beginning, and I rely on him every once in a while for some legal advice when I need it here and there. So, folks, that's our show for today. Thank you so much. We're going to follow this case. I know she goes back to court on the 22nd. Whether the judge will even consider a bail bond at that point, I think is unlikely. If you're facing a charge of murder first degree, I think it's unlikely you're going to be bailed. And I could be wrong, but I think I'm right. And I don't think she's going to get bail. So, folks, have a great night, and thank you so much for tuning in. Mike?
Okay, good night, everyone. Thank you for tuning in.
One episode just ain't enough.